At my culinary graduation dinner, my parents dumped my award-winning recipe book into the fireplace to knock me down a level. Mom told the entire restaurant what she had done. My brother held up his phone, laughing as he recorded me. I calmly took the burn cover and left. They had no idea who I had signed with that morning. The recipe book hit the logs before I could stand. My mother had carried it past 3 tables, past the waiter holding dessert plates, past my culinary school dean who had just shaken my hand. She walked 11 steps from my chair to the fireplace in the private dining room, and she dropped my book onto the iron grate like she was throwing out junk mail. The pages caught in 4 seconds. I counted. The binding cracked. The cover curled. 3 years of recipes. 219 dishes. 1 National Student Culinary Award printed on the 6th page. All of it. Feeding a fire nobody asked for. 14 people watched. The dean set his water glass down and did not pick it up again. Darcy, my brother Troy's girlfriend, put her fork on the side of her plate and looked at the tablecloth. Bianca, the hostess who had seated us 40 minutes earlier, stood at the doorway with the dessert menu still in her hand. Her mouth opened, but no words came. 2 of my classmates sat at the far end of the table with their hands in their laps. Nobody moved toward the fireplace. Nobody moved toward my mother. My father Wallace sat in his chair with both hands flat on the table. He did not stand. He did not speak. He stared at the back of my mother's blouse like a man watching a car accident from across the highway, frozen behind the glass. My mother turned to the room. She was smiling. Not the polite kind, the satisfied kind. The kind you make when you have been waiting to do something for months and the moment finally arrives. You spent 4 years in a cooking school learning to follow recipes, and now you want us to celebrate? She said. She addressed every table, not just mine. Your brother has 53,000 people who actually care what he cooks. You have a rented apron and a line cook's paycheck in someone else's kitchen. This book is 200 pages of your grandmother's food, rewritten in words you learned in school. You did not create a single dish. You memorized what she cooked and put your name on it. Someone needed to stop you before you embarrassed this family with a cookbook no one will buy. Troy held up his phone. The front camera faced me. His thumb was on the record button and his teeth were showing. Relax, chef. I already uploaded the video. My followers love this kind of thing. You know what they call a grown man crying over a cookbook? Content. I was not crying. My hands were shaking, but that was the heat from the grate. The pages had curled enough that the front was separating from the binding. The edges were black and the title was half gone, but the face of it was still there, warped and smoking, sitting on the iron just past the flame line. I reached past the heat. My sleeve brushed the stone. I pulled it free with 2 fingers and held it by the bottom edge while the rest of the book burned behind it. The smoke smelled like paper and glue and 3 years of standing over a cutting board at midnight because I believed this book would change my life. I stood up. I folded the cover once and slid it inside my jacket. I did not say a word. Not because I had nothing to say, but because I had signed a contract 11 hours earlier that made every word in that room irrelevant. I picked up my car keys from the table and I walked out past Bianca, past the kitchen corridor, past the dishwasher station where the night crew watched me leave through the service door. In the parking lot, I sat in my car for 6 minutes. The charred front page was warm against my chest, still radiating heat through my jacket lining. My hands were on the steering wheel and my knuckles were white, and I could still hear Troy's laughter through the closed window because the private dining room faced the parking lot. I turned the key. I pulled out. I was not running from that room. I was driving toward everything they did not know I had already built. If you are listening to this story for the first time, welcome to Family Secret Tales. My name is Flynn. I am 28 years old, and what my mother burned that night was a personal copy of a manuscript that already belonged to a publisher. Let me tell you what that family cost me before I tell you what it cost them. For 4 years, I had been sending my mother $600 every month. She called it help. I called it survival because that is what it felt like on a sous chef's salary of $41,000 a year. The first wire went out in March, 4 years before the graduation dinner. She said the furnace needed replacing. I sent 600. The next month, she said the water heater was leaking. I sent 600 again. By the third month, the requests stopped naming a reason. They just came. A text on the 28th of every month, sometimes just the word ready, and I would open my banking app and send the transfer before my next shift started. I did the math one night after a double service. 48 payments, 600 each, $28,800. On a $41,000 salary, after taxes, that meant I was living on just over $1,000 a month for everything else. Rent, gas, phone, food, car payment, all of it compressed into a number that left nothing at the end. I ate staff meals 5 nights a week because buying groceries meant choosing between bell peppers and a gas tank. I drove a car with a cracked windshield for 7 months because the $200 deductible was money I had already sent to my mother's checking account. 1 month, I was short. I had a dental bill that ate into the transfer window, and I texted her, "Can I send 400 this month and make up the rest next month?" She responded in 11 minutes. "Flynn, you know I depend on this. Your father's warehouse hours got cut. If you cannot handle 600 a month, maybe you need to look at what you are spending on yourself." I sent the full 600 the next morning. I skipped the dental work. The tooth still aches when I drink cold water, and every time it does, I remember that text. Troy needed a deposit for his apartment 3 years ago. $3,200. I covered it because my mother said Troy was getting his life together and needed a stable address to launch his food blog. I paid his car insurance for a full year after that. $2,400. There were smaller expenses along the way. A phone bill here, a medical copay there, another 600 in miscellaneous transfers that I stopped tracking because the math was making me nauseous. The total, when I finally sat down with a calculator and my bank statements, was $35,000. $35,000 out of a sous chef's earnings over 4 years. That was not generosity. That was a second mortgage I could not write off, paid to people who told their friends I followed recipes for a living. And the recipes. That part cuts deeper than the money. My grandmother Estelle taught me to cook when I was 9 years old. She had 14 recipes she considered hers. 14, she wrote them on index cards in blue ink and kept them in a metal box on her kitchen counter. I have that box. I have those cards. Every other recipe in my 219 dish collection, I developed myself, standing in restaurant kitchens for 10 years, testing and failing and rewriting and tasting until the dish worked. My mother knew this. She watched me do it. She tasted the results at every holiday meal I cooked for that family, which was every holiday meal for the last 6 years because nobody else in that house could roast a chicken without a smoke detector going off. But somewhere along the way, Marion started telling people a different story. I found out through my Aunt Lorene at Easter, 2 years before the graduation. Lorene mentioned casually that Marion had been talking about the family recipes at her book club. "Your mother says she taught you everything you know," Lorene told me over the phone. "She says the book you are writing is based on her mother's cooking." I did not correct Lorene that day. I should have. I just let the sentence sit in my chest while I prepped a 60-cover Saturday service. And I told myself it was a small lie, the kind families tell to feel involved. I was wrong about the size of that lie, and I was wrong about how far my mother was willing to carry it. But I was also wrong about something else. For the last 3 months before the graduation, my mother had been different. She called twice a week. She asked about the menu at the restaurant. She asked about the book. She asked about the award. I thought the graduation dinner meant she was finally seeing what I had built. I thought the invitation was a bridge. I wanted to believe her, and wanting to believe someone costs nothing until it costs everything. The night before the graduation dinner, I was closing the kitchen with Sully. Sully is the head chef at the restaurant where I trained. He hired me as a prep cook 5 years ago, and he moved me up to sous chef in 3 years because I showed up on time, learned fast, and never once called in sick on a Saturday. That night we were wiping down stations, and he pulled a chef's knife from the magnetic strip and handed it to me, handle first. It was the same knife I had trained on my first week. "You earned this station," he said. "Nobody gave it to you. When your family tells you cooking is not a real job, remember that I watched you hold this kitchen together on a Saturday night with 3 call-outs and a broken fryer. That is real. Everything else is noise." I took the knife. I did not know that in less than 24 hours, my mother would prove him right about the noise. Now let me tell you what happened 11 hours before the fireplace. Because this is where the story turns, and it turns in a direction my mother and my brother could not have predicted, even if they had tried. At 9:15 that morning, I sat in a conference room on the 14th floor of a publishing house downtown. Across from me was a man named Anwar, the culinary director of the imprint. He slid a contract across the table. $75,000, advance for a debut cookbook. 219 original recipes with technique notes, ingredient sourcing, and full process photography. Publication date set for 11 months out. I signed it at 9:17. The ink was still wet on Anwar's signature line when he told me how he found me. 8 months earlier, a food blog called Platework started going viral. The recipes were sharp, original, and well-tested. Anwar loved them. He reached out to the blog's contact email, which belonged to my brother Troy, and asked for a meeting. Troy did not respond for 3 weeks. When he finally did, he sent a portfolio with no development notes, no process photos, no testing records, and no kitchen shots except one. That one photo showed a stainless steel prep station with a ticket rail in the background. Anwar recognized the restaurant. He called the restaurant. Sully answered. "Those are Flynn's recipes," Sully told him. "Every single one. Troy does not cook. Troy takes photos of Flynn's plates and posts them." Anwar investigated further. He pulled Troy's blog archives and started comparing them against publicly available culinary school competition entries, where my submissions were listed with my name. 52 exact matches. Same ingredients, same technique, same plating language. Troy had not even changed the headnotes. He copied them directly from my drafts, which he accessed through a shared family cloud drive my mother set up years ago for family photos. That drive also held my manuscript backups, my testing logs, my ingredient sourcing notes. Troy downloaded them, stripped my name, and posted them with a photo of the finished plate taken on his phone. 53,000 followers built on recipes he never tested, never tasted during development, and never cooked once in his life. The theft that was meant to erase my credit as a creator led the publisher directly to me. Troy built the evidence trail himself, post by post, for 2 years, and he never knew he was doing it. By 7 p.m., when my mother dropped my book on the grate, the full manuscript was already in the publisher's system. The personal copy she burned was exactly that, a personal copy. The only thing she destroyed was her own relationship with the person who had been keeping her lights on for 4 years. The morning after the dinner, I made 3 calls. The first was to my mother. She answered on the second ring, probably expecting an apology. "The monthly payments stopped today," I told her. "All of them. The 600, the extras, everything. Do not call me about money again." She started to say something. I hung up. The second call was to Troy's car insurance provider. I had been paying his policy as the named policyholder for 14 months. I canceled it effective immediately. The representative asked if I wanted to notify the driver. I said no. The third call was to Sully. I told him what happened at the dinner. He was quiet for a long time, and then he said, "Come in early tomorrow. We have work to do." That was Sully. No speeches, just the next step. On day 2, I met with an attorney named Heath. I brought everything. 4 years of bank statements showing the transfers to Marion, the Venmo receipts for Troy's deposit and insurance, screenshots of every ready, texts my mother sent on the 28th of each month, and a printed archive of Troy's blog with the 52 recipe posts flagged beside my original culinary school submissions. Heath spread the documents across his desk and started with the numbers. $28,800 in monthly transfers, $3,200 for Troy's apartment deposit, $2,400 for Troy's car insurance, $600 in miscellaneous expenses. Total family support, $35,000. Then the intellectual property claim, 52 recipes posted without permission or credit, generating $18,000 in ad revenue over 2 years through 2 sponsorship deals. Grand total for the civil demand letter, $53,000. If you have been following this story, you already know this family made a mistake they could not take back. If you are new here, subscribe to Family Secret Tales and stay with this one, because what happened next is the part that kept me up at night. I was not angry. I was watching my brother's world collapse under the weight of his own evidence, and the precision of it was worse than any argument I could have made. On day 3, Heath filed the DMCA takedown against Troy's blog. 52 recipe posts flagged for intellectual property violation. The process is straightforward. The platform receives the notice, reviews the claim, and removes the content if the filing is valid. Troy's blog was hosted on a standard platform that takes these notices seriously, and every single post had matching documentation in my culinary school records. On day 7, Troy's first blog sponsor called to say they were pulling their contract. They had received the DMCA notification as part of the standard advertiser disclosure, and their legal team advised immediate separation. Troy called me that night. I did not answer. On day 9, his second sponsor followed. $1,500 a month in ad revenue became zero in less than 2 weeks. Troy's food blog, the one with 53,000 followers, the one my mother held up as proof that Troy was the successful one, was generating nothing. The followers were still there, but the content was disappearing post by post as the platform processed each takedown. Day 12 is when the story shifted from professional consequences to personal ones. Darcy, Troy's girlfriend, was at his apartment that evening. She saw the demand letter on the kitchen counter while Troy was in the shower. She picked it up. She read the number, $18,000 in IP damages. She read the phrase, unauthorized reproduction of original culinary works. She read my name on every page. When Troy came out, she held the letter up. How many of the recipes on your blog did you actually create? That is a legal misunderstanding, Troy said. Flynn is being dramatic. I am asking you a direct question. How many of the 52 recipes on Platework are yours? Name one. Anyone. Troy looked at the floor. He stood in his hallway with a towel around his shoulders and wet hair dripping onto the carpet, and he said, Flynn does the cooking. I do the presentation. The presentation, Darcy repeated. You took his food, photographed it, posted it under your name, collected $18,000 in sponsorship money, and you are calling that presentation. Darcy packed a bag that night. She stayed with a friend for the rest of the week, and when she came back, she did not mention the blog, the followers, or the sponsorships again. Some truths change how you see a person, and once they change, they do not change back. While Troy's income was collapsing, Heath flagged something else. During the IP review, he found 3 recipe compilation booklets sold at St. Matthew's Church fundraisers over the past 3 years. The front page of each booklet read, Family Recipes by Marion, $15 per copy. Spiral bound, printed at a copy shop with a clip art border on the front page. Inside were 8 of my original recipes with handwritten margin notes in my mother's handwriting, notes she had copied directly from my development journals on the shared family cloud drive. The braised short rib with the garlic paste crust. The rosemary citrus glaze for roasted poultry. The smoked paprika compound butter I had tested over a dozen attempts before the ratios worked. Recipes I served to my family at holiday meals, where my mother smiled at the table and told her guests, this is how my mother used to make it, knowing her mother never made a single one of those dishes. She said it because the lie felt easier than admitting that her son, the one she publicly called a line cook who followed recipes, was the only person in that house who could feed a table of 12 without ordering takeout. My Aunt Lorene had bought one of those booklets at an Easter fundraiser. She recognized the braised short rib because she had eaten it at my apartment the year before and asked me for the technique. The booklet credited my mother. Lorene said nothing at the time. She kept the booklet in her kitchen drawer, not knowing it would matter. That booklet became evidence. On day 14, I invited my mother and Troy to a private dining room at the restaurant. Sully set the table. 3 chairs, 3 glasses of water, 3 napkins, folded into rectangles. When they arrived, they were expecting an apology. My mother wore the same expression she had worn at the graduation dinner, the satisfied one, the one that said she believed burning my book was a correction and that I would eventually see it her way. Troy walked in with his phone in his hand, screen up, probably planning to record whatever happened next. I started with a question. I looked at my mother and said, "How many of grandmother's recipes do you actually have written down?" She hesitated. "She left a whole collection," she said. "You know that." 14, I said. She wrote 14 recipes in her life. I have the index cards in a metal box on my kitchen shelf. Blue ink, her handwriting, 14 cards. My book has 219 recipes. Which 205 did you teach me? She did not answer. I turned to Troy. How many recipes are on your blog right now? 52, he said. But that is not what this is about. How many of those 52 did you develop yourself? Name one. Give me the dish, the technique, the testing notes. 1 recipe. Troy shifted in his chair. I adapted them. That is what food bloggers do. We adapt. Adapted from where? He did not answer. From my cloud drive. From my culinary school files. You downloaded my testing logs, my head notes, my ingredient lists. You stripped my name and posted them with a photo taken on your phone. You did not adapt a single recipe, Troy. You copied 52 of them, word for word, and you made $18,000 doing it. He put his phone face down on the table. First time all evening it was not in his hand. His knee started bouncing under the table, fast enough that the water in his glass trembled. I placed the DMC notice on the table. Then the publisher's signed contract. Then the demand letter. 3 documents, evenly spaced, each one facing them so they could read the numbers without turning the pages. Then I stood up and I said what I had been carrying for 4 years. You took $28,800 from me in monthly payments I never missed. You took $3,200 for an apartment deposit that was supposed to be temporary. You took $2,400 for car insurance on a car Troy drives to photograph food he did not cook. You took $600 in expenses I stopped tracking because the requests never stopped. That is $35,000 from a man earning $41,000 a year. I ate staff meals for 4 years to afford you. I drove a car with a cracked windshield for 7 months because the deductible was money I had already sent to your checking account. My mother's hands went flat on the table. Then her fingers curled inward. Then her hands slid to her lap. Troy posted 52 of my recipes on his blog without asking, without crediting me, and without paying me $1 of the $18,000 he earned from those posts. He copied my head notes word for word from a shared cloud drive, the same drive where you, Marion, found the recipes you printed in those booklets you sold at St. Matthew's Church fundraiser. 8 of my original recipes, under your name, for $15 a copy. You sold my work at a church and told people it was yours. Her jaw worked like she was chewing on air. No sound came out. That is theft. The blog posts are intellectual property theft. The booklets are unauthorized commercial use. The monthly payments were financial exploitation. My attorney has filed the DMCA. Troy's sponsors have already pulled out. His ad revenue is 0. The demand letter is for $53,000, which is the total of everything you took, and you have 30 days to respond. Troy tried first. You cannot just come after family like this. This is insane. Mom was trying to help you stay grounded. That is what families do. Grounded, I said. She burned my book in front of 14 people and told them I stole my grandmother's recipes. You recorded it and uploaded it for 53,000 strangers to laugh at. That is not grounding someone, Troy. That is cruelty. And you filmed it because you thought it was entertainment. Marian's breathing was audible. Short, shallow pulls through her mouth. She looked at the demand letter, then looked away, then looked back at the number. The line cook's paycheck paid your dental work, Marian, $2,300, April of last year, because your insurance did not cover the crown. The rented apron cooked every Thanksgiving meal you took credit for at your book club, your church group, and Lorene's Easter table. The cookbook no one would buy was signed for $75,000 before you struck the match. And the food blog with 53,000 followers? Every recipe on it came from the man you called content while he stood over a fire, holding the only copy of his work he thought he had left. Troy swallowed twice. Fast. His knees stopped bouncing. His hands went to the edge of the table and gripped it. You burned a copy. The publisher signed the original that morning. All you destroyed was your place in my life. The room was still. Sully stood at the kitchen window behind the pass, arms folded, watching but not speaking. Nobody moved. This is the last meal I will ever cook for this family, I said. The last dollar. The last recipe. The last time I answer this phone. Every transfer stops today. Every shared account closes this week. If either of you contacts me outside of the 30-day response window on that demand letter, my attorney will handle it. My mother looked up. Her posture had folded forward, shoulders dropping, chin following, like a building losing its frame from the inside. Her eyes were wet, but her jaw was set, and she reached into her purse and pulled out a checkbook. The same checkbook I had seen on her kitchen counter for years. The one she used to write checks for the electric bill while I wired $600 into her account every month. $5,000, she said. I can write it right now. We can make this go away. We can sit down as a family and work this out. $5,000. Less than 7% of the $75,000 deal she tried to destroy. Less than 10% of the $53,000 demand sitting in front of her. That number told me everything about how she valued what I had built, and the phrase as a family told me she still believed the word meant something after what she had done with it. I did not answer the number. I pulled the demand letter back across the table, aligned it with the DMCA, notice, and slid both toward her side. Then I reached into my bag and took out the cover, edges black, title half gone, still smelling faintly of smoke 14 days after the fire. I held it for a moment, then set it on the table between the documents like a period at the end of a sentence. I stood. I took my bag. I walked out of the private dining room and into the kitchen corridor. Sully was already back at his station, prepping the evening line. He did not ask how it went. He handed me an apron, and I tied it on, and I started slicing shallots for the bisque, because that is what you do when you are a cook. You go back to the work. My mother's bribe check arrived in the mail 4 days later. I returned it to Heath's office, uncashed, with instructions to include it as an exhibit in the civil file. Within 30 days, every consequence I had set in motion landed where it was supposed to land. Troy's blog went fully dark by day 30. Every sponsored post removed, every recipe taken down. His dashboard showed no cents in monthly revenue where $1,500 used to be. 3 emails from former sponsors sat in his inbox, each one a polite version of the same message: we cannot be associated with an ongoing IP dispute. The demand letter for $18,000 sat on his kitchen table, addressed to a man whose only income source had just been erased by his own upload history. He could not fight the DMCA. Because every timestamp on his blog posts came months or years after my culinary school submissions were filed. He built the case against himself, one stolen recipe at a time, for 2 years. And the video he uploaded from the graduation dinner, the one where he called my pain content, was still circulating among his followers. Several of them left comments asking why a food blogger was laughing while someone's work burned. He deleted those comments. More appeared. He turned off commenting. The video stayed up because taking it down would mean admitting what it showed. The social fallout hit my mother 3 days after the confrontation. Lorene called her. I was not on the phone, but Lorene told me about it the following week. I bought your fundraiser booklet at Easter, Lorene said to Marion. I am looking at page 4 right now. That is Flynn's braised short rib. I recognized the garlic paste technique because he spent 40 minutes teaching me how to get the crust right in his apartment kitchen last spring. And this margin note on page 6 about adjusting the heat for thicker cuts. That is his handwriting, Marion. I have seen his handwriting on birthday cards for 15 years. You copied his development notes from his journal, put them in a booklet with your name on the front, and sold them at St. Matthew's for $15 a copy. To people who know him, to people who have eaten his food at your own table. Marion did not respond for a long time. Lorene waited. The silence stretched until Lorene thought the call had dropped. Then Marion said, You do not understand the full picture. The full picture is sitting on my kitchen counter with a $15 price tag and your name where Flynn should be, Lorene said. I do not need more context than that. The call ended there. Within 2 weeks, 2 members of Marion's book club stopped returning her texts. They did not confront her. They did not send an explanation. They simply stopped responding, and the silence carried more weight than any argument would have. My father Wallace called me once, on day 20. He did not defend Marion. He did not ask me to withdraw the demand. He said, I should have stood up at that dinner. I sat there like a coward, and I know that. I told him I appreciated him saying it. He paused, and then he said, Your grandmother would have been proud of that book. That sentence hit harder than anything Marion had said at the fireplace, because it was true and because it came from a man who had watched the truth burn without lifting his hands from the table. I did not invite him to the restaurant. We have not spoken since. Some people fail you by doing the wrong thing, and some people fail you by doing nothing at all. Both leave a mark. But only one of them sat in a chair 12 feet from a fireplace and watched his wife destroy his son's work without moving a single muscle. 6 weeks after the confrontation, Marion drove past the graduation restaurant. I know this because Bianca, the hostess, recognized her car in the parking lot. The window display had changed since the dinner. Where there used to be a seasonal menu card and a vase of dried flowers, there was now a glass case with a single book inside. My cookbook. The advance copies had arrived the week before, and the restaurant manager placed one in the window with a small card that read, Recipes by Flynn, Class of 2026. Marion parked in the same lot where I had sat the night of the burning, the same spot where I had gripped the steering wheel and decided not to call her. She sat in her car for 8 minutes. Bianca watched from the host stand. Marion did not get out. She did not come inside. She did not pull out her phone. She stared through her windshield at a window display that held the proof of everything she had tried to destroy, a book with 219 recipes, each one carrying the name of the son she told her church group could not cook anything original. Then she started the engine and drove home to a kitchen that smelled like reheated takeout and silence, because nobody in that house had ever cooked a meal worth remembering. I almost left it in the fire. The pages were already feeding the flame, and the heat pushed against my hand like a wall. But it had curled just far enough from the grate that I could reach it, and something in me refused to let her take every piece. I pulled it free. The rest was gone. It was enough. It was always going to be enough. I almost called my mother from the parking lot after the dinner, sitting in my car with the engine running and the contract still in my glove box. The ink on Anwar's signature was 8 hours old. I could have told her right there, in that parking lot, what she had just done. But I did not need her to believe in me anymore. That was the first time in 28 years I understood the difference between wanting someone's approval and needing it. I did not need it. The contract did not care who believed in me. The publisher did not call my mother for a reference. I almost told Troy exactly what his blog was worth to the publisher, that his theft was the breadcrumb trail that led Anwar to my door. Sully put his hand on the prep counter that night, steady, and said, "Let the lawyer say it." So I did. I let Heath's DMCA filing say everything I wanted to scream across that parking lot. If this story has meant something to you, if you have ever watched someone take credit for the thing you built with your own hands, then subscribe to Family Secret Tales, because these are the stories that do not get told at the dinner table. These are the ones that happen after you leave the room. Here is how this ends. Marion's kitchen table had 3 things on it the last time Lorene visited: the demand letter, a stack of recalled church booklets that the fundraiser coordinator asked her to take back, and a checkbook open to a page where she had started writing a number and stopped. Lorene did not stay long. Troy's blog remained dark. His former sponsors did not return his emails. The demand for $18,000 sat unanswered, and Heath began preparing the civil filing. Darcy came back to Troy's apartment, but stopped asking about the blog, stopped asking about the followers, stopped mentioning food at all. She told a mutual friend that she was not sure what Troy did for a living anymore. My world looked different. I stood in the restaurant kitchen on a Wednesday morning, early enough that the pass window caught the first light coming through the east-facing glass. The tiles were cold under my shoes. The exhaust fans hummed at their lowest setting. Sully was 2 stations over, breaking down a whole salmon for the lunch prep, his hands moving with the same steady rhythm I had watched for 5 years. The ticket printer was quiet, but it would not be quiet for long. The advance copies of the cookbook sat in a box beside the walk-in cooler, 219 recipes between hardcovers, every one original, every one tested in this kitchen or the 3 kitchens before it. The publication date was 11 weeks out. Anwar had called the week before to say the first print run was larger than expected. A copy already sat on his desk with a dedication page that read, "For my grandmother, who taught me 14 recipes." The other 205, I learned by burning things and starting over. The charred recipe book cover hung on the wall beside the ticket printer, inside a thin glass frame that Sully had ordered from a shop on 9th Street. The edges were black. The title was half gone. The paper still smelled faintly of smoke if you stood close enough. Sully had asked me if I wanted to throw it away. I told him no. I told him I wanted it where I could see it every morning, right next to the station where the day's first orders come through. Because that is where the work starts. Not at a family dinner table. Not in a parking lot. Not in a private dining room where someone tries to trade $5,000 for a $75,000 life. The work starts at the station. It always has. I picked up my knife, the same one Sully handed me the night before the graduation, and I started prepping the lunch service. The first ticket would print in 3 hours. The cookbook would release in 11 weeks. The cover would stay on the wall. Some families teach you how to cook. Mine taught me what to do when someone tries to burn the thing you built. You pull what you can from the fire, you carry it with you, and you keep cooking.